All right. So I hope everyone is good. So why are we doing this project management? So one of the biggest challenges for each of you to be really successful in this week will be managing your time and making sure that the task is doable. It is an ambitious ask, but definitely doable. And so what we wanted to do is to make sure that each of the groups considers the project management aspect of what needs to be done, and not only considers it, but implements a well thought through, well designed plan in terms of managing this project. So we've put together everyone is part of or will watch the chat with Tolu or the presentation from Tolu. She's the client in this case. But let me just open it up to the group here and just ask people, what does project management mean to each of you? Or can somebody give me an idea of what project management is about? Is it kind of one of these buzzwords? Is it one of these like Ayurveda, which a lot of people I think overuse? Or is there something behind it? Or what's project management about? So somebody please unmute and let me know.
What I know about project management is that it's a process from knowing what you're going to do and actually doing it and coming up with a finished, like some outcome, coming up with an outcome.
Okay. Yeah. So Ken, you're talking about that seems to be sort of driven by knowing what you're going to do and then coming up with an outcome. I would surmise that it's actually a little bit working backwards as well. So knowing what you need to get done and then working backwards to decide how are you going to get it done. Anyone else? I saw Tejas Animi, you'd also unmuted.
Hello.
Hi, John.
Hi. Okay. When I hear of project management, what comes in mind? It's first of all understanding the objective, or what do I want to achieve, and then how am I going to work towards the objective. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Anyone else?
For me, I see project management as identifying what is needed for a particular project and making sure to bring all those resources together and making the best out of them to deliver the goals of a project.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else want to add? So in a similar way to what I want to talk about project management, that you have to get to the goals and you have to work backwards. What I think is important to understand is that you have to at least be an okay project manager. I think in many of your cases, those of you who want to stay technical, those of you who want to work in the world of research, those of you who don't want to work at all, no matter what it is that you do, I believe, based on my experience, that you must be at least an okay project manager. You don't need to be exceptional, but everyone must have at least the basic skills to be an okay project manager. Why is that necessary? So one is that when you say that you'll do something, that you actually are able to deliver that, and not just you working as an individual, but you as a person who may have people on their team, you as somebody who'll be working with external clients or funders or customers or whatever it is. You need to understand what it is that you need to do, and what are some of the really basic, simple tools and techniques so that you're actually somebody who is reliable and people can depend on. So my goal would be that for each of you, and I don't know to what extent you've practiced this or to what extent you've experienced this in your career so far, but this will be one of the big challenges, to make sure that each of you is an okay project manager, at least. Now, some of you will be really good at this and you'll go on to become exceptional project managers. And if you're able to do that, then you will have the capability to get a huge amount done and really harness the resources of your team and your clients and all of the technology around you, and to put this together in really a seamless way. And that's probably difficult to do. But I want, the reason I'm saying this is many people, I think, including some of those who are not on this call, think that project management is useless and it's just a buzzword. And a lot of those things are true. I personally am not a huge fan of this sort of, there's like project management institutes, you hear like Six Sigma, Lean, Agile, there's all sorts of buzzwords that are floating around. I want to make sure that each of you is at least an okay project manager. If for nothing else, people who don't know how to manage themselves or manage people around them, they end up over-promising and under-delivering. And that by itself is something that you should never do. You don't want to be one of these people who says that they're going to deliver ABC and they're disorganized and they're just not able to get it done. And they end up, the reputation ends up suffering, and I don't want that to happen. Now, in this case, what we have is we have a 2-week-long project, and we've provided some of the framework around that. And now each of you has their teams of 5 teams of 6 and 1 team of 5 people. And now you have to put this together and figure out how do you go onwards from here. So I did not a lot of thinking, but I did actually a single Google search, and I've searched project management before, and surprisingly or not surprisingly, Wikipedia is getting better and better. And Wikipedia says all I did is took the first 2, or this might even be just the first paragraph in the Wikipedia definition of project management. I just want to read it out, and the entire presentation is just built on what they said, because it covers things to a large extent. Now, I'm not going to go through it word by word. I'm going to cover the first slide. So what does Wikipedia say? Let me actually just present this. There we go. I hope you guys can see that. Please let me know if not. So what does Wikipedia say about project management? So project management is the process of leading the work of a team to achieve goals and meet success criteria at a specified time. So I'm just going to say that again. Project management, where is this? Project management is the process by which you lead the work of a team and you achieve your goals and you meet your success criteria at a specified time. The first challenge of project management is to achieve all of the project goals within the given constraints. And the typical constraints that you have are scope, so how much work you need to get done, time, when it has to be done, the quality that is expected, and the budget that you have. And the secondary challenge is to optimize the allocation of necessary inputs and apply them to meet predefined objectives, blah, 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 blah. So I just want to walk through these in brief. So in terms of leading well, before we do that, are there any questions? Does anyone disagree with this? Has anyone heard something else that they think is missing here? This is where I really wish we weren't online, because then we could talk about this much more. Nevertheless, what's missing? Is there anything missing? You can also type if you want. So is there anything missing from this definition? No? I found it pretty all-encompassing. There's different ways to think about it, but I found this is a pretty good definition. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. So I think in terms of this project, so this I wanted to take it in using this project as an example, but not only to focus on this. So I think deciding on the whether you have a team leader is something that the group should consider. I think at the very, very minimum, you should have somebody who's responsible for keeping time. So I've done this in the past with different projects where it is a group of people who are working together. And if the whole team says, okay, we nominate person ABC, this person is responsible for keeping us on time. Why is this useful? Because then otherwise person ABC feels like they're overstepping their bounds, or they're just annoying people and nobody nominated them to be the timekeeper. Inevitably, some people may be late, and this gives that person license to say, look, my job is to make sure we stay on time, so this is where I'm doing this. So that's the strong recommendation. I would think about whether you want to have a team leader. Each of you the whole group is jointly responsible, and a team leader is not necessarily the big boss or the person who's really in charge. But if someone has the skill set where they can say, I am better at working with different people, I'm better at putting everything together, and if I take over that responsibility, we'll have a better overall product, it may be useful. So I would say that the group should have an open discussion. I would encourage people who are good at this sort of bringing different sorts of information together, dealing with the iteration, making sure that everyone is understanding what other people are doing. Don't hesitate to say, I think that I would do a good job in this. I also think it's important to say that the team leader is not the big boss. This is not that you're owning the team, rather you're taking on the coordination responsibility. The very, very, very minimum is that everyone needs to have a clear role and responsibility so that the team is, everyone knows exactly what it is that they should be doing. So achieving goals and meeting success criteria. So I'm just going to keep talking. Please unmute or please ask questions or do whatever you need to do if you want to get my attention. You need to know what the goals of the project are. Now, in this case, I think the goals should be at least kind of clear. I hope that what Tolu said this morning was useful. And she was pretty open that her goal is to start developing an understanding. So she's not looking for a yes or a no answer. She wants to start to get an understanding of what is out there. But as you go on into the future, this is one of the biggest things, and this is especially true when you do consulting work or you're working on Upwork. If you don't know what the client is looking for, and if the client, him or herself, doesn't know what they're looking for, you simply, it's a high-risk project and you're unlikely to be successful. And one of the most typical examples that I've heard, other than this thing from Alice in Wonderland that I'm showing on the screen, is where somebody says, dig me a hole. And you start digging and the person's like, you're like, am I done? And that person's like, well, I don't know, I keep digging further. And then you should ask, what is a hole? And the person will say, I don't know, I'll let you know when you reach the hole, that's the size of the hole or the type of hole that I want to see. And so it typically happens, and it's often due to the client not being a good client or not being organized enough to structure what it is that they're looking for. So if you don't know, you need to ask. And if you still don't know, I think I've actually duplicated some content here, you need to start working through. And I would say if you don't know what the project goals are, you need to ask the person who will decide on whether the project is successful. They should have written it down. So ideally, and I think this is one of the nice things of a good client, it should be written down and say, this is what a successful project looks like. If you still don't know, and this is often the case, or there are elements that are unclear, you should write down what your understanding of what the goals are and share it with the client or with your boss or whoever it is and say, this is what I understand to be my goals. I have the following 3 questions. Can we agree? And I think it's really important to get it in writing because managers are busy. And if you just get somebody while they're walking out to their car or getting a coffee, they may give you an answer that they haven't fully thought through. It's important for you as the project manager or somebody who's managing that project to make sure that you're working on a project which has some definition of success. Make sure that you know what that definition of success is and get that in writing if possible. If your client is simply not able to tell you what the project goals are, it's a high-risk project. So option 1, I would say, is agree on something. So if, like Tolu said, I think she handled it quite well, where she says, I don't know exactly what I'm looking for, but at the end of week 1, I want to get some idea of what sort of data you found. Can you give me 3 or 4 examples that tell me about urban air quality, about food quality or food quantity? Option 2, if you want, feel free and just take the risk. Understand what other success criteria are. So there's the goal, and the goal might be a report, but there may be other success criteria. And this is where, as you go on in your careers, it's not that relevant for this project. You need to understand what is your client actually looking for. And many of those things may be left unsaid. So if your client simply said, and maybe you get this on Upwork, they want to understand what to do with this data. But does that mean that they want a dashboard? Do they want a report? Do they want a set of things that they can tweet? Do they want something that they can just hit forward and send to their client? Do they want it to look like it comes from them or that it's been outsourced to an external person? You need to do a little bit of work, or at least always be aware of what the other success criteria are. And I've put some thoughts down around that. There's a lot of cultural aspects, and this is where sometimes once people get a client, a contractor that they're comfortable with, one of the reasons that they want to stick with them is a lot of these sort of soft skills or other sorts of knowledge, they've already been internalized. So once you've worked for client ABC and you get to understand that, okay, when they say I have to do the data analysis, a little bit like now with 10 Academy, people are still asking, do we need to do slides? Or we need to submit our code. We need to add comments. These things have become understood that this is what we're looking for. And those can often be important differentiators between somebody who is okay, somebody who is good, and somebody who is doing work which the client thinks is not acceptable. I would also say that there's an important people aspect here. Again, not relevant for this, but when you go out into actual real world work, you as the project manager are providing you're preparing or coordinating a piece of work which is being delivered to somebody or to a group of people. What do those people think of this project? Is everyone equally engaged with the results of this project? Is everyone equally convinced? Will they all buy the results? Will they all be convinced by the type of analysis that you're doing? And so I think it's important to collect as much of that soft information as possible, because this will be, once you've identified the goal, if you want to be successful, identifying those sorts of success criteria, I think, are also very, very important. So we've talked about, just to go back to the original definition of the slide, we've talked about leading the work of the team to achieve goals and meet success criteria. So that, in a way, is kind of, that's it when it comes to project management. So you know that either leading the work of the team that you have, or coordinating it, or at least in terms of making sure that you stay on time, that has to be done. And the second is figuring out what is your goal and what are the different success criteria. And the third one is looking at the time aspect of it. The time aspect of it, in many ways, is super simple. You have to agree on when you're going to deliver to your client. It's the final product and the end deliverable. And actually, if you do your job well, there is no reason for you to be late. You should, and as you get experienced, you will figure out what are some of the unknowns. How do you build in enough time and make sure that you, plus your team, with the technology that you have and the client that you're working with, you will get into a rhythm where you're able to consistently deliver quality work on time, exactly as expected. But what else do we think about when we think about time? So I would say interim deadlines, they're very important, both for internal and also with sharing, in terms of sharing with the client. We'll talk about that in a second. You need to have clear internal deadlines for different team members, which when you put them together result in a realistic time frame, and you should leave space for updates and for edits as well. So I would say that for most client projects, you should have, I'd say, actually, I'm going to change this. You should have at least more than four sort of touch points. So you should have a kickoff meeting, and it's important and it's underestimated, but when you start a project, making sure that your client is aware of what is it that you've agreed on and what are you working towards? What is your timeline? What is your understanding of the goals? What exactly is going to be delivered? In which format? By when? What information are you waiting for? Putting all of those things together, I think, is really important, and that's why a kickoff meeting is really, really valuable. Don't underestimate the value of writing stuff down and getting that person to agree on it. If your client simply refuses to agree because they're busy or they're just they have whatever other challenges, it's also okay to write to your client and say, this is my understanding. I need an answer within the next 24 hours. Otherwise, I will be late, and if I don't hear from you, I'm going to proceed. Also important. Interim submissions or project updates. So you should have many of these. In past work that I have done, I've gotten into a rhythm where it's, depending on how long the project is, for a very long project, like a 3-year long project, we would do monthly updates with very detailed quarterly updates, which are usually in person. For short projects, you should be meeting at least once a week, or even more often, depending on the type of project. You should have your penultimate submission, so your second last. You do your final presentation, you gather your feedback, and then you update all of your materials, and you do your final submission, including all of the feedback from the client. When is it okay to be late? So I said that you don't be late, and that's fine, but things happen. So when is it okay to be late? So the first thing I would say, it's in capital letters. I put 2 nevers in there, a couple of exclamation marks. You should never be late without letting your client know. So if you simply don't show up, or you simply don't send anything in, I think that in this day and age, it's not okay anymore just to send nothing. Between sending an email, a WhatsApp, even if your power is down, even if you're, find a way to inform and get an okay from your client that you're going to be late before you're late. I mean, it's not good to be late anyways, but just not showing up and submitting nothing is, I can't think of any reason why that's okay, short of asteroid hitting the Earth, or I'm exaggerating now, but I hope you guys get the point. So okay reasons for you to be late is to go to your client and say, look, I'm supposed to be handing this into you at midnight, but I found new data. I want to run a bit more analysis. Now, are you okay with this, or should we just run what we have? So if there's something that you found which perhaps changes the scope of the project, or for some reason you would like to delay the submission and it won't, you can explain why and how it would work towards the overall goal or the success criteria, then that's fine to share with and see what they think. The second is, your clients will often be coming back late to you with changes. And if the client comes back to you late, let's say Tolu comes back next Friday, so a day before the submission, and says, look, this is really interesting what you guys have found. Now, before you submit, I don't just want to focus on Africa. I'm also interested in looking at the Middle East, because we found that Dubai also had bad air pollution, or I don't know, Saudi Arabia, or a country, or Asia, or whatever it is. So do you think that we can do a bit more work on that? And in that case, you should not say, yes, of course, I can work for the next 24 hours without stopping and get it done. It's more reasonable to say, I hear what you're saying. It's going to take me an extra 2 to 3 days. It's going to cost this much extra money. Are you okay with that? And that would mean a revised submission timeline. So those are, I would say, 2 okay reasons when it's okay to be late. So not okay reasons would be, I got busy with another project, my personal life, my girlfriend wanted me to make her dinner, so I just put your project on the back burner. Somebody just got sick. It's, again, you can communicate that and say, this is the deal and this is why I'm going to be late. But just not showing up, or just saying that, okay, I'm late and I haven't got anything done, is usually not okay. What in a real emergency, I think what's okay to do, and you have to handle this on a case-by-case basis, is to say, this is where I am right now. I'm going to send you what I have. And this is where, even though I'm late, this is what the next step will look like. And many of you will have infrastructure challenges. And what I would encourage each of you to do is to, at the outset of your of doing one of these engagements, be very upfront with your client or your boss or whatever it is about what you have in terms of infrastructure, and let them know what are some of the solutions. So we've had challenges with Intent Academy as well, where people just haven't had access to good infrastructure. And what kills me is where people don't have a solution. And so if you go to your client and say, look, I just don't have internet, or I just don't have electricity, what should I do? And your client could be anywhere in the world. If you cannot give them a reasonable solution and let them know how much would it cost and what sort of change will it have in terms of your ability to deliver, you aren't doing your job. So I would say right at the outset, if you are doing work, for example, on Upwork, and you know that your power is unreliable or your internet is unreliable, you should be upfront about that, and you should let them know that, okay, this is why I'm giving you a better price, because I might be 1 or 2 days delayed here and there because of electricity. Even better is to say, look, I have a really good co-working space where my electricity uptime and internet uptime is this much more. It'll cost X number of US dollars per month. Do you want to sponsor that? Because it'll help my ability to deliver what I'm doing. So that covers the time aspect of it. So I want to pause there and see if there are any questions or thoughts. I've been talking for 20 minutes. Is this clear to everyone? Are there any, am I talking crazy? You guys busy playing Sudoku?
It's clear, Arun.
It's clear, okay. Any questions? Must be a question.
Yeah, can you give us more detail on how we can let them know that an emergency has happened and we need some time?
So give me a scenario. So you're supposed to give me a Tableau dashboard by tomorrow. So, and tell me about your emergency.
There was no power the whole night, maybe.
But that's not an emergency, that's predictable.
Okay. So I've been invited to a dinner that I can't refuse to go, maybe.
Is that an emergency?
I don't know, help me out.
No, but you asked the question. So how can I give you an answer if I don't know what's an emergency?
Okay. So, okay, a family member got sick and I spent the night at the hospital, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is where you have to deal with different cultural dynamics. So I would say in the US, that's usually not an acceptable, unless somebody is about to die, that's usually not okay. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, but it may not be universally accepted as a okay excuse. Because was there anyone else that could have, maybe it depends a little bit on the importance of the submission of what you're doing. I mean, emergency should be an emergency. So normally I mean, maybe, Binyam, let me ask you a question. How many emergencies like this could you forecast per year?
No, I would say 0.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. It's difficult for me to say. So what I would do then is to find, if I was in your situation, I had to go to the hospital or I had to take care of something, I would try and do both, right? So you try and get it done to the point where you can get it done. And if you have to sit at the hospital, then maybe you take your laptop with you and you hope that you have a good enough internet connection, or you make sure you get enough stuff done, or you have to ask another family member to help out, because if it's really the next day that you have a deliverable that's due, that's on one hand, it's really bad timing. On the other hand, when you're doing your project planning, ideally you should have a little bit of slack left in your timeline, so you're not having to work 24 hours a day, so that if you lose one day out of your whole timeline, that you're sunk. So I would say the one piece of advice I can give you is don't make stuff up. Don't make excuses up. Be super open and be super transparent. In the long run, that will always pay off, because if you start making excuses up, people can smell that. Be upfront. Be upfront with people, and even if they don't agree with the answer, they will appreciate that you're being upfront with them, as opposed to just making stuff up. Yeah, Anastasia is asking about the machine crashed. Yeah, I mean, normally, I don't know how often that happens these days, if you have good backups and you're taking care of that. So yeah, you can say that, but maybe one way to say that is, I would, even if you have an emergency, I don't think that in the global world of work, your personal emergency, I don't think it means it has no cost to you. People will understand, but there is some cost to you. So if your machine crashed and you lost all of your work, in the back of my head, I would also be thinking, well, how is it possible that she's not backing up her work, or he's not backing up his work all the time? So, or are they running such an old machine that it's so unstable? So I would say be open and communicate that, but take as many steps to prevent that as possible. Tejasunimi, you have a question?
Yeah, hello everyone. I don't know if I'm Ed. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much. My question is that, as a project manager, now that you're going to do a web development project, like a very big project that, like, you have many branches. You have the graphics designer, the UI UX, you have the backend developers, the front end developers, the people that would deploy it. So my question is that, as a project manager, do you have to know a bit of each of these tasks? Do you have to know, or you can just know about any of them? Or do I have to also know about UI, at least a little about each of them? So that's my question. Or I can just be neutral. I might not just know about it and still be a project manager. I don't know if you got my question.
I got your question perfectly. It's a really, really, really good and important question. And it depends on what sort of person you want to be. So I think that if you want to, and this is true, I think also in politics, right? Ministers get shuffled around all the time. And I kind of wondered, and I asked a minister once, I think he used to be the Nigerian Minister of Sport, and then he became was he the Interior Minister? So ministers always get shuffled around. And what he said is, you need to spend the first month of whatever it is that you're doing asking questions and learning enough to be able to manage the project well. And so you need to at least be aware of enough so that you can ask the questions. So to know what the lingo is, to know what some of the pain points will be. So you need to be aware enough to ask reasonable questions. Otherwise, you can very easily get stuck. You also want to make sure that if you are the overall responsible, you want to make sure that you can ask questions so you don't get, people can't just tell you things that you aren't able to gauge or judge whether they're reasonable or not. So you need to know enough so you can have an intelligent conversation. I don't think you need to go into the details. One thing that you absolutely need to do is you need to make sure that you know what the teams are doing, even if you don't know the details. So that could be that you're able to hire people really well, or that you can judge who you need to trust and who you can't trust. So you need, I would say, summary is that you need to know enough so that you can hold responsibility in some way. And if you don't know, then you need to educate yourself. You need to ask lots of questions. You may need to find a mentor. You may need to, I wouldn't say take a course, but do a bit of reading so you can ask reasonable questions. Because no one person can know everything about everything. And that's especially true as you go further in your data science career. You will never be able to keep up to date on all of the different deployment technologies, the math that's underlying all of the work that's being done, all of the visualization that's being done. But if you are active and hungry and ask a lot of questions and get a good idea of what people are actually doing, and you keep your sensors out, you'll get a sense of when things don't make sense. I hope that makes sense. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Yep.
So how do you deal with the, I mean, when you are a project manager, how do you deal with the urge to do it all yourself, especially when you see that some of your team members are not doing so well? How do you manage that?
Okay, so one thing I want to say is I don't want to make such a distinction between a project manager and people. So we are all, and this is why I say it's at least important that all of us are at least okay project managers, because even if you are not a project manager, even if you are, let's take Yababel, right? So Yababel 2 years ago was a research shareholder and was doing research in big data and astrophysics. But he was also managing a project. He had a grant, he had team members, he had to deal with travel, and they had research goals that they had to work with. And I think he would be the last person, I don't know if he's here right now, he would be the last person that would call himself in that time a project manager. But there were also things that he had to manage responsibilities, and he had to make sure that basically what he said he would do, he would coordinate his team to be able to do that. Anyone who, I think if you always have the urge to do it yourself, I think that in many ways that's a lazy way out, because if you really want to have, let's say 10 times impact, then you need to have other people working with you. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you need to have the courage to let other people go off and do what it is that they're doing. If you maybe you haven't had the chance yet to work with really good people, but when you find somebody very, very good and you realize that they are better than you are in whichever field it is that they're working on, and if you create the right conditions for them and give them a task and let them go off and fly on it, and your job is to kind of make sure that everything works together well and the overall project is happening, I have no doubt that 5 really hungry, motivated, coordinated people can get done more than almost any one individual person. So you need to, I mean, how to fight that urge? I would say if you are working on a project, Binyam or anyone else, where it's only you who can get it done yourself, then I think your scope of ambition is too small, because you're only one person, you're only one human being. There's almost nothing that you can do yourself better than a team of 5 motivated people who are working in a coordinated fashion could do. Important quality of a project manager. So it's hard for me to bust those, to put them out into a list. I would say that being organized, being curious, and being a good communicator, I think those are 3 of the most important things. Around emergencies, I would really say, I mean, just thinking about that, if you make your plan in a good way and you're aware of your resources and you can realistically predict what's going to happen, your emergencies should not be as, they shouldn't be big emergencies. If you're working in a place where you know that you have bad power, why would you plan that you have 24 hours of electricity? If you're a human being and you know that you also need to sleep and to eat, you should never be planning to work 24 hours a day. If, like me right now, I have 3 children, COVID is coming back in Germany, I have started to plan that I know that at some point my kids will not go to school and they will be home with me, or I'll have to coordinate with my wife and we'll somehow have to manage with 3 kids and homeschooling. You need to plan that into whatever it is that you're doing. So as you gain that experience, the number of emergencies which are completely unpredictable should go away. And I really don't want you guys to go out into the world and to be using emergencies as a sort of get out of jail free card, if those of you who play Monopoly. Emergencies should really be something which is completely unpredictable. And of course they happen, but if they happen too often, that for me is it's a bad sign. I would also use the example of the training here. We can say that for the majority of people, you face some of the similar challenges in terms of electricity or internet or availability. Some of you are able to manage better than some others. And did you face harder or easier conditions? I don't know, but I think some of you somehow organized things so that more stuff got done, which is a sign that it is possible. So I want to go ahead. So the primary challenge is to manage all of the goals within the given constraints. That's it. There's nothing else to say there. I just want to talk about the 4 constraints, which are scope, time, quality, and budget. So making scope is, especially with these sort of remote work platforms, scope can change pretty regularly. And clients also like to change scope. And it's your job to let them know if they want to change the scope. That may be okay, but scope changes are not free. It will take time for you to rejig your project. It'll take time to do the additional work. You may need to hire more resources. You may need to have more technical resources, and there may be additional cost. And so I think it's your job to say, if you want this change of scope, that's fine, but it's going to take me 2 extra days. It's going to cost you an extra X amount of time. It'll introduce the following uncertainties. So it's your job. It's going back and saying, obviously within reason, but going back and saying, what you're asking for is a change of scope and it'll have the following impacts is important. And if your scope changes and you're not managing that, it will be very difficult for you to be successful in delivering your project to the expectations of the client. So manage your scope very carefully, because your scope, I would say, is also your goals. Time is one of the most expensive things that you have to do. So either buying more time, so adding team, or delaying deliverables, it's really expensive. It's very hard to do. So for you to go out and, if you have a project that's due in a week, to find the right person who has time, that's available, who can just get stuff done and jump in and help you, is really, 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 really hard to do. So treat your time as one of the most valuable resources that you have, but also the time of your team. And part of that, I would say, means protecting the time of your team from useless meetings. If somebody has information, you should go and give them that information as quickly as possible. Time is an inflexible quantity, so protect that information really carefully. Tools and technology can help you get stuff done faster. This is one of the reasons why Slack has become a well-used tool. A lot of businesses are paying a lot of money to use Slack because they find that it helps their employees use their time in a better way. And look for 10x employees. So the whole philosophy of what is somebody who can have 10 times the impact of somebody else, it isn't something that we've talked about, but I think through your time here working in the community and learning from other people, I believe that you've seen that there are some people who can make magic happen, who think, who have both the work ethic and the curiosity and the ability to self-learn, and also the ability to be nice and to contribute to the community and just to get amazing stuff done in a short amount of time. Those are people that you want on your team. And those are people that we would say are this bias to, I don't ask a question, but I just find an answer. I post it to the community. I help other people. Those will be people who, as you go out into your careers, will have an exceptionally large impact on your future. Look for those people and keep them on your team. In terms of quality, I think the quality will depend very much on the project. It's an important part of your brand. Keeping your quality very high will drive your future success in a large way. Not much more to say here. Your quality, I think, is very important. Obviously, you need to get it done. In this case, budget is not really that important because your budget is very fixed. It's basically zero. We're providing some computing resources, but managing your budget carefully can help you to be profitable. So I would say, taken together, your job as project managers is to lead your team to deliver your project on time and to the expected level of quality, while managing your scope, your time, your quality, and also your budget. Yeah. I wanted to just say one more thing in terms of how do you align the work that everyone is doing towards the objectives. So I think it's very clear. It's very important to make it clear to everybody that which tasks have to get done. So making a very long list and ideally mapping it out, what has to get done so that the project gets done. Make sure that for each task, it's clear who is responsible, when does it need to be done, and what does it mean to be done. So a very clear quote unquote definition of done. You need to have a system of either formal or informal coordination so that everyone is aware of what other people are doing, and you can iterate. So using Tejas example, if the UX people have gone out and they have realized that actually they need to have really large buttons because maybe their market is older people and they don't like small buttons, then all of a sudden they can't fit as much onto the screen as they previously thought. Maybe there needs to be a redesign. So that iteration is really, really important. Be careful when you try and divide up the responsibility between too many people, because sometimes when it's everyone's job, it's nobody's job. Suggestions for this week, your goals are clear, your team is clear, your timelines are clear, your budget is clear. So if it was my team, I would do the following things. I would have a daily team stand-up. I would nominate one person, or at very most two people, who are overall responsible for delivery of the project. It doesn't mean that they're not doing other things, but they are coordinating all of the things that other people are doing. I would make a super detailed schedule and have clear responsibilities to different people, and I would front load your work. So get as much done in the first week as you can. Make the goal stack, I think, is a really important result. Asking the right questions to the client is a really important result. Doing really good exploratory data analysis is important. Front load your work, and if you get that done, then the second week, I think, will be super easy. So goal stack, Binyam, if you look at you can Google it. Basically, it's a structure of what your report looks like without any content. So you can say it's a PowerPoint where you, and so as I'm answering Ilukra, I need a more specific question, please. Give me a more specific question, please. So a goal stack is where you have the structure of your reports. I would say, what does the table of contents look like? And for each item in the table of contents, you should make clear what sort of content will you cover, even if you haven't done the research yet, so even if you don't know what the content looks like yet, but going and saying, this is what I am going to present at the end. And in this case, you have some idea of what you know what the project goals are. You guys know what it'll look like in terms of data acquisition, EDA, what your modeling will look like, what your reporting back will look like. Put that together, agree on what that structure looks like, get your client to agree on that. And once that is done, that'll drive a lot of your future work. Other questions? Thoughts? I mean, so I don't want to lecture, so please ask. You can type, you can unmute.
Arun?
Yeah.
So quick one. Would you like to share an experience where you managed a mini project, and what were some of the lessons you picked prior to learning much more about project management?
So to managing a mini project?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to say, right? I've started to think of many things in terms of managing different projects. So one thing that I've started to do these days is also to start thinking of kind of daily family life as a project. So I'm busy trying to fit a lot of different things into life. The objectives are, especially we're 5 people, 3 kids plus me and my wife, and there are many different objectives, but recently starting to think of overall family objectives. And what is, then you get into prioritization, because we can't possibly make everything fit. So what is it that we want to get done in the next week, month, year, and what is actually really essential, and how do we make certain things more efficient, as opposed to where can you look for that, what is important for us to do ourselves, what can we outsource? So one example is, it's possible in the city where we live in to get some food delivered. So not pre-made food, but groceries. And that saves a lot of time, especially for heavy things. So milk or drinks, we can get them delivered. There's services that deliver fresh vegetables, so that in terms of quality and then also in terms of value, that drives a big efficiency. How do we recently, like a year ago, we moved so that we could save a lot of commuting time. So, I mean, it's difficult for me to give an example of project management, because there's so many different examples of it, but it's really no different in theory to what I've described here. But in practice, in practice, you just need to, sorry, I'm just getting some notifications here that are distracting me. Interestingly, I'm getting a notification, my wife's sending me messages, and that kind of is distracting me, because it's about this. Oh my God. Yeah, sorry, I'm losing focus here for a second. Let me just close this. Yeah, you need to understand what is important, and how do you sort of deliver your quality project in a way that's actually important. It's difficult for me to give an example, both Illicore and Prosper, because I've managed a number of projects. I think one of the hardest things to answer Illicore's question is, how do you motivate people to achieve the task, and how do you keep people on track? And so I think one of the lessons that I've learned there is a very simple one, is that you have to assume that the majority of people want to be successful, And if you pick the right people, let's assume that they want to be successful. Your job is to give them the framework within which they're able to be successful. So what really frustrates good people is when their time is wasted, or they're doing stuff that they feel like they don't see how this contributes to the overall result of what it is that they want to do. So how do you, your job is to coordinate everyone, to align everyone, and almost to, even if you're not the overall responsible, it's almost like if you're going on holidays, you're going out, let's imagine you're going out for dinner with your friends, and if everyone is just wasting all their time trying to decide, are we going here, are we going there, then maybe one of you puts your time together and says, okay, which area are we going to eat in first, which part of the city, and then you try and decide which type of food is it that you want to eat. And then by asking the right questions, then you can, and maybe then you say, okay, we're going for Chinese food, so-and-so is a Chinese food expert, so you tell us where we're going to go. Helping to guide the discussion and letting each person's own strengths shine through is one of the important things that you'll need to do. But there's a lot of personal aspects that will also come in. You'll realize that some people work better in certain ways, some people work better in other ways. People have weaknesses, people have strengths. So your job in an ideal sense is to balance all of those things. But the very simple thing to do is just to make sure that everyone knows what it is that they're responsible to do, by when, to which level of quality, and to make sure that if everyone does their job in a good way, that you have made sure that the end result will satisfy the client's expectations of cost, time, quality, and scope. Any other questions? No? Are there any questions that are specifically related to week 11 and 12? So Ida's asking, how do I manage Tan Academy? One of the hardest things that we had to figure out was what is the scope of this project? Because the scope, we weren't sure. We were kind of, we have been building the bus as we're driving it, as you've all seen. And so as the scope hasn't been clear and we're doing this very much by ourselves, then that's a challenge. So how do we manage it? I think that we picked some people that we could trust, and we decided to keep everyone aligned to the overall goal. Our overall goals, we just started this project, this batch, with 4 questions that we had, and everything that we've been doing has been working to answer those 4 questions. We have a team meeting once a week. We've used Trello with some success, partly because sometimes things change and I just haven't spent that much time updating it. But a lot of it is built on us, the team that's there, being aligned towards goals, the very similar set of goals. We have people who are engaged. I'd say we have a core team of people who have said that we're going to do whatever we need to do to get this thing done, and that's helped a lot. And then we've used tools like Trello. Slack has been okay. And then simplifying this down to a rhythm, and we make sure that we, as much as possible, deliver on that rhythm. So that every week we have our challenge. The leaderboards recently, we've been a little bit out of date. We've had some extreme challenges in terms of resources, in terms of unpredictability of a number of different things. But I think sticking towards our overall definition of success, and that the entire team agrees and believes in that definition of success, has enabled us to do, we did much better with this edition than I think we did with the first 2 editions. So I don't know if that answers your question, Ada. Trello, yeah, Trello, they had last year in Trello. So Trello is okay, but Trello is, it's a tool. I mean, one thing that I would, tip that I would give you is there is no tool. We once, for a client, we hired these really super renowned, really fancy event planners, and these guys did an amazing job. These were the guys who they put on the Davos summit, right? So the client in this case wanted to hire these guys. Really expensive, but really good. And we worked with them for like 2 years, and I was amazed by how good these guys were. And then I asked them, how do they do their project management? And the guys they only did two things. One is they only hired really hungry, aligned people. And the second thing they did is the only tool they used was Excel. And they said, we don't need any fancy tools because tools are only as good as the people who use them. They say they find Excel easy enough to use, but they make sure that they have hungry people who are super aligned to this mission. And for them, their mission was to make sure that the event that they put on is perfect. And so that single alignment of mission is maybe the one of the most important things that you can do. I wouldn't say as a project manager, but as a product owner, you have to be, do I want to use the word religious? You have to be almost religious about making sure that everyone is aligned to the overall goal. And for the Intent Academy case, what we wanted to do is think about, can we create within 3 months, find brilliant people out of a large pool of people and make sure that they have the skills that they need to be job ready. And so that sort of alignment or the centrality of that one mission, it allowed us to put a lot of things away and say, okay, that's important, that's not important. But everyone was aligned to that overall task. And of course, there was a lot of things that we didn't know, right? I mean, there were a number of people on this project that I've never worked with before on our team. So how do we make sure that they'll actually show up on a Saturday night and answer questions? Or what do we do if people are not working out as you imagine? Having that centrality of mission helps you to, I would say, simplify your decision-making process. And so I would say for week 11 and 12, the central mission is, can you get some sort of information, or can you provide the client with some idea of what impact, what are people talking about as it relates to food quality, food quantity, or urban air quality as it relates to COVID. So it's being curious, it's teasing out some of that information. And that tells me that, from hearing what Tolu said before, at this point, she's okay if we don't have gigabytes of data that says, you know, on January 27th, Lagos is dirty air. On April 1st, wow, isn't Lagos air clean? And the same person then in May saying Lagos air was clean and now it's dirty. She's looking for more, she wants sort of detectives to go out and to be creative. You guys have the big advantage that you understand the contexts of Nairobi or of Lagos or of Addis or of, I don't know if any of you understand Kampala, but you may be able to look for different sorts of sentiments that somebody who was, let's say, a data scientist from San Francisco probably wouldn't have been able to think about. And so it's that the central question is, can we find some things that have been happening? So while waiting for questions, we have a couple more questions. How many of you groups think that you'll actually nominate one person to be the overall coordinator? Has anyone talked about that?
I think we have in a group. Still making a decision though.
Okay. It's, you know, so it's nice that Lawal has this video on because I get to know his mannerisms. So when Lawal is thinking, then he does the dance. Lawal's doing. I can't see other people's mannerisms, but I know the Lawal thinking dance. Anyone else? So Ada says yes. Lawal says they're thinking about it. Other groups? I'm starting to see the Binyam yellow is also coming out in people's profile pictures, which is nice to see. Or I don't know if it came from Muluwerk. No, was it? Somebody else has the pictures. So I see Wamuyu, other people. We definitely will. Okay. So I made a really long, so keep asking questions. It's a really long presentation on a needlessly complicated topic. But I think the most important thing to think about is make sure you know what it is that you as the team or the project is working towards. Make sure that that's clear, and then make sure that you have a reasonable plan to get there. I think the rest of it will work itself out. But it's very easy to get lost. It's very easy to just let the client say, okay, fine, I'm going to accept your change of scope, without doing the detailed work of working backwards and saying, okay, that's going to take me extra time, or I can't guarantee my quality because you're asking for something different. Yeah. Any last questions, guys? No? Everyone ready to be a project manager? Yeah. So remember what I said? Please, everyone, you don't need to be a professional project manager. Actually, in many cases, you will not be. But there's almost no job in which you don't need to be an okay project manager. Those of you who leave today's session or leave our training and say, you know what, this project management is crap and it's too management and I don't want to be part of it, you can say that. But as you go on in your career, you will have to manage something, even if it's just managing yourself, even if it's just managing the resources that are at your desk. So you don't have to spend a lot of time doing it, but you need to at least pick up some skills to be okay at it. All right. So I know it's been a lot of calls. I think Idris is starting in half an hour. Rawia's session is starting. We weren't able to change it, so that's starting in an hour and a half. So yeah, cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. Hope everyone is good and looking forward to seeing people's interim submissions tomorrow. GhostX, questions to ask. And I think it was team roles or maybe schedule. I'll have to check what we wrote down. If you guys have any questions, so my job or my role in all of this is to be sort of your engagement lead or manager. Consider me as, if you guys are doing the project within a consulting company, you guys would be reporting into me in terms of non-technical stuff. So if you have questions, if you want some advice, if you want to resolve anything, send me a note. That's what I'm here to do. We're not going to be doing a bunch of tutorials this week. We are going to be there to support you guys, and learning will happen through asking questions. All right, I'm going to stop recording. And Hadi is asking, so Hadi, I think you should. I mean, if you don't know what if it's not clear what every person's role is, then I think you are at risk of confusion. So yes, I think you should be stating person A is responsible for ABC, person B is responsible for ABC. Front load your work, make it explicitly clear, otherwise you will not be using your time in the best possible way. If different people are writing code which overlaps, or people are doing analysis of the same thing but doing it in parallel, it should be super explicit. In terms of the interim solution, let me check what we wrote, because I don't remember exactly. I think it's written there. I mean, remember, there's no the grading for this week is really driven by what you're going to get done at the end. For the interim submission, I'm just having a look here. I'm pretty sure we wrote that down clearly somewhere. Yeah, let me post in Slack. I'm not finding it right now, but Hadi, I'll post that in Slack. Yeah, so let me have a look offline, and then I'll post it in Slack. All right, have a lovely day, everyone.